Hello, and welcome to our second ever Study in Sweden Google Plus Hangout. My name is Rachel Weiner, and I work at the Swedish Institute, which is a government agency here in Stockholm, Sweden, with promoting Sweden as a study destination for international students all around the world. I'm joined today by two of our fantastic digital ambassadors. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hey, my name is Jesus. I am Spanish, and I study at Gävle University, and I also study at SSE, Stockholm School of Economics.
All right, thanks, Jesus. I'm Marta. I'm Ukrainian originally. I study here also at Stockholm School of Economics in the finance program.
Great. Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining us. So today our topic is Ask Us Anything, which means that we're going to talk about whatever you guys want to know about studying in Sweden. But to start out, I am going to give a little bit of background information about how you can go about finding information about studying in Sweden on your own. Hopefully you have found us through the internet, either through this very Google Plus channel Sweden or through one of our social media channels. But in addition to social media, a great way to find out more about studying in Sweden is to visit our website, which is Studyinsweden.se. So I would recommend that as your first stop. At Studyinsweden.se, you'll learn everything there is to know about programs in Sweden. In Sweden, we have not only study abroad programs, but mainly bachelor and master programs where you can do your entire degree in English in Sweden. A lot of people have a misconception that you need to speak Swedish to study here, but that's actually not the case. We have almost 1,000 degree programs that are taught entirely in English here in Sweden at about 35 different universities all around the country. So we have a whole bunch of universities here in Stockholm, the capital city. There are universities throughout the south of Sweden and all the way up to the Arctic Circle in the north. So there are a lot of great options for anyone who's interested in doing a bachelor's or master's degree abroad. And to start out, I think a common question that we get is, how do I even get started? You know, maybe you've heard about Sweden, you know we're up here in Northern Europe, you've heard about the Swedish welfare state, and maybe you've heard of our universities, but you don't know how to get started finding a program. So Jesus and Marta, can you share your experiences? How did you find a program in Sweden and go about choosing?
All right. Well, first off, I really knew the direction in which I'd like to go. So I knew it would be finance. And then I went about, well, trying to see which schools are the best in Sweden in that direction. So obviously, Stockholm School of Economics came out first, and it's basically pretty well-known school for the finance program since it's ranked highly in Financial Times ranking. So already while doing my bachelor's, I pretty much knew that that's the school I'd like to go to.
For me, it was pretty similar as to Marta. I knew that I wanted to study in Sweden because I fell in love with it, but and I knew that I wanted to study something related to business, but I didn't know where. So in the website, universityadmissions.se, I looked through the universities, and Stockholm School of Economics came as the best one, so I chose that. And then I still had too much free time, so I decided to start studying another master program. And I wanted it to be flexible. So in university admissions website, I chose the option distance degree, study in distance. And this was one of the programs that was available, the one I am currently studying now, which is energy online, energy engineering. So that's how I came about it, and I'm really happy about the choice.
Fantastic. It sounds like you guys both are happy with your choice as well.
Absolutely.
So speaking of choosing universities, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, so I was wondering how, if I don't know which university is best, how do I go about choosing one?
Thanks, Jesus. That's a great question. And I think that's another top question that we receive. In Sweden, as some of you may know, there isn't as established of an internal ranking system that people can just immediately log into and navigate and say, right, this university is number one and I'm going to choose it. In Sweden, like in many parts of life, we have a more egalitarian view of things. So actually our entire university system is ranked as the #2 higher education system in the world, which means that no matter what university you choose in Sweden, you're pretty much guaranteed a world-class education. With that being said, of course, you will eventually need to choose one university to attend. And there are a lot of factors that come into play. It's really impossible to say that one university is better than the others in general. The important thing is to decide what you're looking for in a university and then to find a university that matches your interests. So for instance, if you're interested in a business school, it makes sense to do something like Jesus and Marta and find the top business schools in Sweden. A lot of Swedish universities and business schools are ranked internationally, so rankings can be one way to go. You can also visit our website again, Studyinsweden.se, where we have a list of all the universities in Sweden, and you can click around and see what each university offers. Of course, you can also do just a simple web search for the subject area you're interested in. But the most important thing to keep in mind is, in addition to the actual program you're interested in and the subject area, maybe the city, if you want to be living in a big city, in which case you could look at Stockholm, Gothenburg, the Malmö area, or a few others, or if you want to be living in a smaller, cozier town with even easier access to nature, if you want to be at a big university or a small university, and those kind of things. If you want to be at a university that has really tight connections to the industry, or if you want to be at more of an academic, theoretical place of study. So again, the most important thing is to read up on each university and specifically the program you're interested in. Really get in contact with them. Contact them on Facebook. You can follow them on probably Instagram, other social media. Get in touch with current students and ask them any questions that you have. And one great way of doing that is to follow our blog, where Jesus and Marta currently write a few times a month. And you can interact with all of our bloggers who are studying all over Sweden and ask them questions about what it's like at their university. So now we're going to take questions from you guys, which is the real reason that we're here today. So we received quite a few questions in advance of this chat, which, as some of you can see, we now have a live Q&A feed as part of this Hangout. So if you do have questions, we really encourage you, please ask them, and we'll go through and answer them one by one. But to start out with, we'll go through a few of the questions that were written on our event wall before the event started. And if you're joining us right now and you have previously written your question on the event wall, please do go ahead and write it again in the list here in the Q&A box so that everyone else can see your question. So one of the first questions we received is, I would like to study a PhD. We actually received quite a few questions about doing a PhD. And it's actually difficult for us to give blanket information about how to apply for a PhD, because unlike bachelor and master programs, which are taught, which have a centralized application procedure, for PhD programs, you'll need to apply to a specific university, which means that if you are interested in biomedicine or sustainable development, dentistry, what have you, what you'll need to do is find a university or maybe a selection of universities that have a department in that subject, and then actually contact that department directly and find out what kind of PhD positions they have and how the application procedure works. We also received a question on MBA programs. Are MBA programs free for people from the European Union? The answer to that question is theoretically yes, because European Union students do not pay tuition fees in Sweden. However, we don't have any MBA programs in Sweden as such. There are executive MBA programs, which are not free either for Swedes or non-Swedes. And then the vast majority of business master's programs in Sweden are MSc programs, which are still great, rigorous business master's programs, which will give you really good connections to the working world and to industry, but they're technically a Master of Science degree and not an MBA degree. So that can be good to know. I think we'll hop right into our questions from our audience, and we can start out with a question in German. So Jesus, would you like to read this question out loud?
Yeah, sure. So basically, I'm going to translate the question into English. It's the question is about English requirements. Is the English level that you learn in school enough for studying here in Sweden, or is there any additional courses that a student needs to take in English in order to study here? And my answer is that it's definitely good enough to be able to study here. most all the students that I meet in Germany towards the end of the university, they speak amazing English. So I'm pretty sure your English is good enough. You just need to be able to document this by sending your grades or that you have taken this course along with your application documents. But I'm pretty sure it's definitely good enough.
And I'll also add to that that although your English probably is good enough, you'll usually need to be able to prove it, like Jesus said, either through an IELTS or a TOEFL test, which are the most common international tests, or through a few other methods. For instance, if you've done the IB program at university, or excuse me, at upper secondary school. So do you want to give a short summary of the answer in German as well?
Ja, ich will sagen, das reicht, das ist genug, um hier zu studieren, aber du musst das auch prüfen. Zum Beispiel kannst du den TOEFL-Test nehmen, machen und danach die Dokumente schicken mit den anderen.
I would actually add to that if you've done your bachelor's in English, I think for most schools, at least for SSC, I'm sure it's enough. So you don't have to take TOEFL or IELTS if you've already done your bachelor's in English.
Yeah,
exactly. Great point. Thanks for adding that, Marta. I think the key thing to keep in mind about English is that if you visit the admissions website, which is universityadmissions.se, you'll find the exact guidelines that are in place for bachelor's and master's programs. And then actually each program will have its own individual requirements as well. So for some, a 6.5 IELTS might be required, for some a 7, and so on. So the key thing is to check what's required for your specific program. Great. So shall we take another German question right away?
Yeah, sure.
Great. So Jesus, would you like to take this one?
Sure.
Well?
So this question is asking, can I study anywhere in Sweden? And the second part of the question is, how important is your your grades from school in order to get admitted? The answer to first question, you can study anywhere where there's a university. So if you check out the university admissions .se, there's a map with all the universities in the country, which is I recommend you to go there. And with regards to how important the grades are, it depends on the program you apply for. Normally, it's listed in the program requirements, how important some of the criteria are and the eligibility criteria. But on average, I would say that it's only one part of the requirements. Normally, you also have like a cover letter to write. You also should write about your hobbies, your work experience. So it's important, but so can other factors be. So to check out the precise requirements for the program you're applying, check out the university admissions website and the course. Jetzt ich werde diese Antwort zu Deutsch sagen. Du kannst überall in Schweden studieren. Du musst nur sehen, aufpassen, dass es eine Universität gibt, der du willst studieren. So besuch noch die universityadmissions.se da kannst du es sehen. Ja, ob es eine Universität gibt. Und das Abschlussnote, es kann wichtig sein, aber du musst für diese individuelle Kurs sehen, ob das wichtigste Sache ist oder nicht.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jesus. So I think we will take a question in English now.
Great.
From Loai, who has asked us, I study business information systems, but I want to shift to environmental engineering. Should I look for a master's or should I look for a U grade program? I am not entirely sure what you mean by U grade. If you mean undergraduate program, I think it depends on the program that you find. So a number of Swedish master's programs will require that you've done a bachelor's or an undergraduate program in the same subject. Whereas you'll also find other master's programs that will allow you to come in with a bachelor's in a larger variety of subjects. So for instance, I know you guys are doing masters in business. Did you do your bachelor's in business as well?
Actually, I didn't. I studied engineering before this. And my program, you could go into it without having studied business, which was also one of the reasons I chose it.
Yeah, for me it was actually that I was studying business, in fact. So I didn't switch specialization, but as far as I know, there are many students also in SSC that do that. So I think it depends on the program, of course, but you can totally do that.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So I would recommend you to check the course the program that you're particularly interested in, and look at the requirements. And if it says that you just need a bachelor as a requirement, then you should apply for it. If it says that you need a bachelor in that environmental engineering, then you cannot apply for it. So that's how I would make the choice.
Exactly. And I'd also add that you can always contact the coordinator of the program or the head of the program and ask them, I have this background, is this enough, or do I need to maybe add a course? Sometimes you won't need a full bachelor's in the subject, but you might need 30 ECTS credits or 1 semester or so on. So it's always better to ask and to find out that they're flexible than to not ask and shut yourself off from an opportunity that could have been great for you. So that's our advice on that question. We now have a question in Polish. Marta, do you want to take over on this one?
Sure. All right. So just to summarize the question briefly in English. Basically, what's the name of the... Dominika. Okay, so Dominika is asking whether, she's saying that her English is good enough to understand us just now, but she's a bit afraid that perhaps it would be too much of English to comprehend while having all the lectures and everything in English in the university. So the question is whether she should be afraid. Okay, to start off answering in Polish a little. No nie ma się czego bać, dlatego że sama miałam taką sytuację, kiedy zaczęłam tylko się uczyć na angielskim i na początku to było trochę trudnie, ale już za miesiąc wszystko było fajnie i wszystko rozumiałam. To jest tylko sprawa praktyki i sprawa, żeby troszeczkę się zwyknąć do tego języka. Okay, now I'll switch back to English and just perhaps if my Polish wasn't good enough for you to understand, but in brief, I would say for everyone who's starting to study in English and is afraid that beforehand they were studying in their native language and they might not understand the terminology or anything. It's nothing to be afraid of. I had myself the situation coming from actually high school to my bachelor's program, switching from Ukrainian to English, and all studies were in English. So it usually takes maybe a month to get used to the terminology, to lectures, and usually it's nothing really to be afraid of. You have people from different backgrounds and with different levels of English. It's usually really easy and fun to get used to it and to feel that you can actually speak. It's no problem.
Yeah. And I would like to add to this that this is a great learning opportunity for you as well, to improve your language skills. And you always get the slides as well. So the words that you don't understand, you could look for them, because the key information always comes in the PowerPoint slides. So you could translate that if there's a part that you don't understand.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. That was a really good question, I think. I think now we'll actually take one of the questions that we received before the chat in our event page. we received a handful of questions from E.G. Fuller, who asked us if students can work legally in Sweden. And the answer is yes. Any students here in Sweden can work legally. There's also no limit to the amount of hours you can work. So theoretically speaking, you can work as much as you want. However, your studies are a full-time job in and of themselves, so naturally it's difficult for you to work more than a certain amount of hours a week. But there are no legal requirements for, or there's no legal cap to the amount of hours you can work. How have you guys found it to find part-time work here in Stockholm?
Well, in my case, I worked as a teacher's assistant at school, basically. So that was a sort of a part-time job, which was actually a one-off job. And I would say it's a really good way to go if you want to find a job in Sweden while studying here. To go through your university, and usually there are plenty of opportunities there. And you also get counseling, sort of advice, and so on to handle all your tax matters or whatever happens to along the way, you know. So usually with the university, it works really well. Also, another opportunity could be to go and work not necessarily in Sweden as such, but as a freelancer. So that's not attached to any country. So in that sense, it's always good to go online and find a freelance job, and that's one way to go also.
Yeah. I haven't been looking too much into this, but there's definitely lots of possibilities. There's numerous adverts that appear in your career services at your university, or even at Arbetsförmedlingen, which is the unemployment agency in Sweden. So if you want something, you will definitely find something. Mohammed, one of the digital ambassadors, he wrote a good blog post about this. So if you check blogs.studyinsweden.se, and then find the article by Mohammed that says that talks to you about which part-time jobs you can do in Sweden alongside your studies.
Fantastic. And here's actually another question about what it's like to study here. Jesus, do you want to read this question?
Yeah,
and
sure.
Maybe answer it as well.
So you've been accepted to study in KTH. Congratulations, it's a really good university. And you're asking me how the daily life is while studying in Sweden, and if it's enough just with speaking English in order to go through life, or do you need to learn Swedish, or do I even recommend it? So first of all, life in Sweden, it's I think it's quite relaxed. In most capitals around the world, you see people very stressed. Here in Stockholm, people are much more relaxed. So here there's something quite important, which is work-life balance. So people have their lives in addition to having their jobs. And most people don't work over 40 or 50 hours a week, which is really good if you want to have your life outside work or studies. As for learning English, learning Swedish, if it's necessary, it's not necessary, especially if you only want to study here and then go away. But if you want to work here, I strongly recommend it to you, because most real full-time jobs require Swedish. You can find some that don't, but it's a really good advantage. And also it's a way of showing to the people that you're willing to incorporate their values and that you're willing to adapt to the country. So Swedish people really appreciate it if you at least do the effort of learning a few basic words. There's loads of choices to do everything you want to do here. There's loads of sport opportunities, travel opportunities, there's loads of nature, there's loads of intercultural events, loads of entrepreneurial settings, loads of whatever your hobby is. You will be able to connect with like-minded people here and do all of that.
Marta, do you have anything to add?
Well, I would say I don't speak Swedish, unlike Jesus. I'm getting along pretty well, and yeah, so usually I would say Sweden is one of the most foreigners-friendly countries that I've been to. Certainly the most foreigner-friendly country, I would say. So I had encounters when I talked to really elderly people, like 90-year-old people, in English. So pretty much everyone speaks English. In that sense, you have nothing to be afraid of in terms of not speaking Swedish.
Yeah, that's totally true. And I'd love to add at the end that KTH has, like most Swedish universities, many clubs of like sport activities or societies in which you can meet other fellow students and have fun with them and have a great time. So there's a lot of social life in KTH if you want to take part in that. And the buildings are really beautiful.
I actually agree on that point as well.
Yeah.
The buildings are gorgeous. So I think now we'll actually take another question that we received before the event that was given to us in Spanish.
Yeah, great.
So I'll hand it over to Jesus again.
So
and maybe go through all 4 of them. It's a 4-part question.
Yeah, great. So the question is in 4 parts. I will answer it in English and then in Spanish. So the first one refers to how are the scholarships granted? What is it based on? Why do some people get awarded scholarships? Why others won't? And I think Rachel, you might be able to answer this.
Well, I can at least give an answer, which is basically that the scholarship selection procedure is handled by a dedicated team here at SI, so it's a separate team from us, but it's separate from the university admissions procedure. So the scholarship selection process takes place based on the application that you send in. So your letter of motivation, your reference letter, and whatever other documents were required for your specific scholarship application. They do have a Facebook page, so if you have questions about applying for a specific Swedish Institute scholarship, I really recommend joining the page, and then you can ask your questions to the scholarship team directly. I believe that the name of the Facebook page is Swedish Institute Scholarships for Studies and Research. And you can also find them linked to from both our website and through our Facebook page.
Lo que dice la respuesta es que hay un equipo aquí que se encarga de seleccionar quienes son admitidos, a quienes les va a dar, y tienen una lista de criterios según la cual eligen quienes van a recibir este dinero, esta beca. Entonces es en unos cuantos factores, sobre todo tu carta de motivación y tu aplicación. Y si tienes alguna pregunta más en lo que es importante para la beca que estás pidiendo, hay una página en Facebook donde puedes hacer tus preguntas. El link está en nuestra página web. Si vas a nuestra página web puedes encontrar el link a la página de Facebook. Suerte. The second part of the question reads, in 2016 and 17, will there be scholarships in South America? If this is not the case, will some of these countries be able to apply for scholarships? Yes or no?
Another great question. We anticipate that the scholarship programs will be back to normal from next year. However, we are not able to confirm or give any more specific information about the scholarships that will be on offer for next year until November or December of this year. So please do check back. We'll post information as soon as it's available on Studyinsweden.se and on the Facebook page as well. Generally speaking, in an average year, several Latin American countries are included in the Swedish Institute Study Scholarship. So hopefully we'll be able to offer scholarships within that program again for next year. But again, it's not been confirmed yet. So the confirmation will come in November or December. As for other scholarships, I'm not sure exactly, of course, which country you're from, but there are quite a few Latin American countries that have governmental scholarships that allow for students to study programs in Sweden. For instance, I know Ecuador, Colombia have programs amongst others, and of course in Brazil you have the Science Without Borders program, which is for specific studies. So I'd also check with your government if there are international scholarships that you can use for a master's degree in Sweden.
En español, todavía no está confirmado que va a haber becas el año próximo, aunque creen que va a haber. Entonces, en noviembre o diciembre, si vuelves a la página web, ahí lo puedes mirar. De todas maneras, muchos países en Sudamérica tienen becas gubernamentales de tu gobierno para ayudarte a estudiar afuera. Entonces tienes que mirar las becas de tu país a ver si hay algo que te puedan dar una beca para irte al extranjero. Países como Colombia o Ecuador o Brasil tienen este tipo de becas. Moving on to the third one. How is the process if I want to introduce myself to be admitted in university, and if I also want to obtain a scholarship for the SI? So what's the admission process like, and if I want to obtain a scholarship with the SI?
The admissions process is actually fairly straightforward. We have a centralized application process in Sweden, which means that you will go to one website, which is universityadmissions.se. We'll show you actually at the end of this chat as well. And through that website, you can apply to nearly all of the universities in Sweden. You can apply for 4 at once, or different programs at once. So if you visit universityadmissions.se, you'll find all the details on how to apply, but basically you will apply with similar documentation to what you would need in another country. You'll need to fill out a basic online application form with your personal details. You'll need to send your grades or your academic transcripts. And then for specific programs, you'll need to send other specific documents like a letter of recommendation, a motivation letter, proof of English proficiency, like a TOEFL or IELTS test, which we touched on a little bit earlier, and so on. If you're doing an artistic program, you might need to send a portfolio and that kind of thing. So the key thing is to visit universityadmissions.se and find out exactly what documents you need, both people from your country and also people who are applying to the specific program that you want to apply to. Or, of course, if you're applying for several programs, check each program to find out what's needed. In terms of the SI scholarship, the application period takes place after the application deadline for studies. So usually you'll have to apply to study, you'll have to apply for a master's program by January 15th. That can vary a little bit depending on if that is a weekend, but roughly January 15th each year. Then the application period for scholarships will be in February usually. It's usually a 7 to 10 day period when you can turn in your application. So the key thing is to keep an eye on Studyinsweden.se in November, December. At that point, we'll be able to come out with confirmed details on which scholarships will be available for 2016, 2017, and the exact dates for when you can apply. You'll then apply for the scholarship through an online portal that you can access on Studyinsweden.se during the application period.
Entonces, si quieres venir a estudiar aquí, vas a la página web universityadmissions.se y ahí eliges tu programa y te pone los requisitos que tienes que cumplir para estudiar aquí, como proficiencia en inglés o que hayas trabajado antes o tus estudios previos. Ahí puedes encontrar todo. Y para hacer una aplicación a las becas del SI, esto ocurre después de que hayas hecho la aplicación para tu máster. La aplicación para el máster termina en enero, el 15 de enero más o menos, y estas aplicaciones para las becas de LSI empiezan en febrero. Tienes unos 7-10 días para hacer la aplicación y lo haces mediante la página Studyinsweden.se durante esas fechas. Y el proceso es parecido. And then the last question, the papers that I sent to the university for admission, do I have to send them together for the SI and for university, or do I have to send them separately? I think it's for the scholarship application, it's separate papers, no?
Yeah, exactly. It's separate. To apply for a degree program, you need to send specific documentation, which we just discussed, and which you can find in more details at universityadmissions.se. Then for the scholarship, it's a completely separate application procedure. So you'll log into an online portal through Studyinsweden.se, where you'll then upload your letter of motivation, any reference letters that you need, and so on. So it's a separate application procedure.
son dos aplicaciones separadas, sobre todo porque el de las becas en SI lo tienes que hacer online mediante un portal y el otro es solo enviar documentos. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Jesus.
Okay.
We now have another question in German. Selena asks us if she'll have trouble in Sweden as a Croatian citizen, or if it would be better for her to come as a German citizen. Mm-hmm. As you have a couple of different EU citizenships, have you encountered any advantages to having one over another?
Yeah, I don't think it matters at all here. The only thing that would matter to you is if you get scholarships from your own country to study somewhere. So normally I would expect Germany to give you more scholarships to study in Sweden, but I don't know. So if that would be the case, then I would come here with your German citizenship so that you can apply for German scholarships. But there's no real practical advantages of doing that apart from this.
Great. Fantastic. We also have a question. What are the primary criteria to qualify as a guest student in Sweden? And I'm not sure what you mean by guest student specifically. If you're referring to coming as an exchange student or doing a study abroad program, the criteria will probably differ quite a bit from the criteria for coming for a full degree program. If you want to come through an exchange agreement that your university has with a Swedish university, you usually need to check with your university to find out what requirements they have to be eligible for their exchange program. Then, in normal circumstances, you'd also have to apply as an exchange student to the university in Sweden, but those types of requirements are completely different from the general application procedure for a full degree program. Usually it's more lenient. For instance, if you're coming during your bachelor's degree, you wouldn't need a completed bachelor's degree to come as an exchange student. But again, that's very specific on your particular university and the kind of arrangements they have with the university in Sweden. There are also a few universities in Sweden that offer study abroad programs, which are, say, 1 semester or 1 year where you come as a guest student, but not for a full degree. And those also tend to have different requirements for entry than a full degree program. But again, in that case, it would be important to check with that university what requirements they have. If you're wanting to come as a full-time international degree-seeking student, the criteria, I guess we went through them a couple of minutes ago in English, but basically you need to prove that you meet general entry requirements and then program-specific entry requirements. So the general entry requirements for, say, a master's program are usually things like having a completed bachelor's degree, speaking English to a certain level, which you can prove through a proficiency test or another way, and so on. Whereas specific entry requirements for a program might be something like you need to have studied 180 ECTS credits of engineering, or you need to be fluent in French, or so on. Requirements that are specific for that program. How did you guys find meeting the entry requirements to study at Stockholm School of Economics and Gävle?
Yeah, I think it's pretty well set up. It's pretty clear, so you know what you need to meet. The tricky part is that's the minimum requirements. Then there's some students that are better than this, and if there's too many students that are better than this, and there's only a limited number of spots, then only the best ones get in. But it's pretty straightforward. It's worth a try, I'd say. So.
I mean, in general, what I did myself. I submitted the GMAT test. I didn't have to submit the English proficiency test because I had a bachelor's in English. Then I submitted the motivation letter and my CV, and I believe that was it. Yes, I did also have to submit a transcript from my bachelor's program. Other than that, I think that was those were the 4 things that I had to prepare.
Great, thanks guys. So we have a follow-up question from Uzer, who I think is asking in response to what you mentioned earlier, Marta, about how to go about applying to become a TA, teacher's assistant. Do you have any advice?
Sure, yeah. Usually it helps if you've been a teacher's assistant before. So for me, it was easier to win a spot because I did maybe 3 TA jobs before during my bachelor's. But that's not a must. I think it really depends case by case. At SSC, we don't have a formal TA program or anything like that. It's more of a case by case basis, whereas a professor just posts an ad on the study portal or by email that, hey, we are looking for teaching assistants for this particular course. In order to qualify as a teaching assistant, you are supposed to, let's say, have taken a course in finance with the A grade or something during your bachelor's, or you should have taken a bachelor's within this field. So usually they specify those kinds of things. And from my experience, it helped me that I had previous exposure to that job, but it's really case by case. So it depends on the university, depends on your particular case. But in general, it usually helps if you probably are interested in that and approach professors proactively. If you see nothing coming up, we also can go like that. And if you do well in your classes, you wouldn't have any trouble approaching professors for TA positions. So that's the general advice.
Great, thanks, Marta. We have another question in Spanish.
Cool. From Pablo. So Pablo is from Ecuador. He can speak English, but he doesn't have any TOEFL certificate. Is there any possibility of applying to study in Sweden? If
So I would say yes and no. You don't specifically need a TOEFL qualification to study in Sweden. There are a number of different ways that you can prove your proficiency. So one way is, of course, the TOEFL test. The IELTS test is also very widely accepted, and it's accepted here in Sweden. And then aside from those 2 tests, there are other ways that you can prove your proficiency, but usually those are based on previous studies. Like, for instance, Marta did her bachelor's in English, which meant that she could use that as proof of her English proficiency. Also, if you went to upper secondary school or high school in English, or did an international baccalaureate, an IB program, that is usually enough to prove that you have high enough English skills. There are general requirements for this, and then individual universities will also have their own requirements. So if you haven't done anything that will prove your English proficiency, I would suggest doing a TOEFL test or an IELTS test, because it'll be useful to you in any number of different scenarios, and also it's just the easiest way to prove your English skills. But if for some reason you're not sure, if maybe you've studied in some capacity in English, maybe not a full degree or otherwise, I would first of all suggest visiting Studyinsweden.se. And again, we'll show that website at the end of this chat, where you can find really detailed information on what's required. And secondly, if you find a program that you're interested in, you can contact the department and ask them, look, I have this background, would you be willing to accept it? It's not necessarily the case that they'd be able to make an exception or consider your qualifications on a case-by-case basis, but if you're not sure, it's always worth asking them. And of course, it's always a good idea to just take one of the proficiency tests, and then you have that as proof of your English.
Sí y no, depende. Si tienes un baccalaureate internacional, entonces ahí no debes tomar el TOEFL, o si has hecho otra actividad que pruebe que hablas inglés muy bien. Por ejemplo, si tienes un bachelor en inglés, o si eres de nacionalidad inglesa o algo por el estilo, entonces no hace falta. Pero también tienes otras opciones como tomar el IELTS, pero para estar seguro, mejor que vayas al curso en universityadmissions.se y ahí te pone tus requisitos. Si no estás seguro, siempre puedes contactar al departamento de tu universidad para preguntar, para estar seguro de que tu nivel de inglés es suficientemente alto o de que lo que has hecho es suficiente para no tomar el TOEFL. Pero te recomendamos que lo hagas porque te puede ser muy útil para el futuro y es la opción más fácil de demostrar que hablas inglés.
Perfect. So we have another question from Selena in German. Jesus, do you want to read the question?
Yeah, so she's inquiring if she wants to study in Sweden. Is there any people that introduce her when she arrives here, or if she has like some speech partner or like language partner to talk with? And the answer is usually when you come here, you have like 2 introductory weeks, which is your university student association, which organizes it. So you do lots of activities within students to get to know each other, and they show you around the university and they explain you things. And then you also have the university introduction days, which is usually a couple of days in which they explain you how to do everything and how everything works. And then, yeah, would you guys have anything to add to this?
What do you think, Marta?
I'd say the intro weeks, as you mentioned, they're a pretty good way to get to know people. Regarding the particular, maybe what you mean is a kind of a buddy, usually for exchange students. So they have those programs where you arrive and there's somebody there to meet you, the buddy program sort of thing. I didn't particularly encounter it here, but I think there's no problem with the integration as such. So it's more of a general approach rather than assigning a body to you to guide you through all the introductory stages of your orientation in Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Perfect. So I think we'll actually wrap up our chat today by answering a question that was maybe, in a sense, the most commonly asked question on our event page, which is, I want to find a program in a specific subject. I want to study IT, I want to study sustainability, I want to study nursing. How do I go about it? How do I find a program? So in addition to what we've discussed today, the absolute easiest way to find a program in Sweden is to visit university admissions and use their program search function. Usually we have a program search function on Studyinsweden.se as well. Unfortunately, it's currently offline, but you'll find the complete program database for programs in Sweden at universityadmissions.se. So I'm actually going to go ahead and show you what it looks like to use universityadmissions.se. So this is Studyinsweden.se, which is our website, and I'll refer back to it in a minute. This is universityadmissions.se. So as soon as you arrive, you find a search bar, and you can use this right away to search for any programs. You can search by university, so you can choose universities in a specific area. You can just choose specific ones that you find most interesting, or of course you can search for all. You can then also search by semester. This also is a great way to look at what's been offered in the past. If you're curious, you can see what was offered all the way back to actually spring 2013. And then down here, at more search options, you can also search by courses and programs. So you might want to search for programs, and say you want to do a master's, you can select master's level. And then you can hit search, and you'll find all the different programs that are offered. So right now we have almost 1,000 master's programs listed that are starting this autumn. And at the bachelor's level, we can also have a look at what's online right now. Not all of these are currently open for admission. That's worth noting as well. We have about 100 bachelor's programs open as well. The deadline to apply for this autumn for EU students was April 15th, and for non-EU students was January 15th. It can still be possible to apply late to programs, although if you do need a residence permit, it might be tight for you to apply, receive a notification of admission, and receive a residence permit in time. But if you still want to do a late application, you can click here, show only courses and programs that are currently open for application, and then do another search. And we can actually go back to masters now to see how many are available. And there are nearly 300. Jesus just taking a selfie. Good point. There are nearly 300 programs that are still open for admission. So if you're interested in applying for the fall, it's not too late. On this tab, all you need to know, you find absolutely everything you could wonder about admissions to Swedish universities. So over here on the left column, you have basic guidelines and information. Then we have information about applying for studies. So an overview of the admissions process, the entry requirements, English requirements, what kind of documents you need to send in, and so on. And then information about how you can find out more. So I really recommend familiarizing yourself with all the information at university admissions if you're interested in making an application. But maybe if you're not sure yet if you're going to apply and you're just investigating, I recommend spending some time at Studyinsweden.se. And at our website, you can find, in addition to information about programs, we have information about Sweden in general, what's it like here, a listing of all the different universities in Sweden, help finding a scholarship, a fantastic blog where you can read all about what it's like to study here, a calendar of events where you can check if we'll be coming to your country anytime soon, information about our social media feeds, testimonials from some really interesting alumni who have studied here, and even some resources if you're interested in printing out a brochure or so on. So definitely visit the website and take a look. If you still have questions after visiting the website, there are a number of ways you can ask them. Number one, I would say, is visit us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page that we update daily, and we're always in answering questions as well. So I really recommend joining us on Facebook. You'll get updates from Sweden, and you'll hear the latest news. You'll get reminders of when it's time to apply, and you can ask any questions that you might have. Another great way to ask questions about, especially what it's like to study here, is to visit our blog. And two of our fantastic bloggers you see sitting next to me today, Jesus and Marta, we have 10 bloggers in English and actually 2 bloggers in Chinese on our Chinese website, if any Chinese speakers are watching this video. On the blog, we have an Instagram feed and also blog posts. And if you want to contact the bloggers, you can comment on blog posts, of course, and also quite a few offer an email address here in the right-hand column, where you can send them an email directly, and they'll get back to you right away to help you out and answer any questions that you might have. A final way to ask questions is to visit your embassy or consulate. And if you visit swedenabroad.com, you can really simply find the embassy or consulate in your country and their contact details. It's actually great to just check in on their website and see what kind of programming they offer. You might find some fun events, some fun cultural activities, and of course contact details if you want to speak to someone in your country about maybe applying for a residence permit or visa, or just in general about coming to Sweden. So we have one final question, and then we'll round up for the day. And this is another question in Spanish from Pablo.
Yeah, so Pablo, he thanks us for the answer, and he would like to know more or less how much it costs to live in Sweden. Do you think, Marta?
Well, yeah, I actually did a blog post on that, and like the rough estimation was that you could go anywhere from, like, the minimum is 7,300 kronas. So in euros, it's roughly what, 700 something euros. I don't know what currency you're mostly used to, but I usually figure it in euros. And if you are really modest in your needs, then I think you could survive for 520 euros. That's what I counted, like trying to get the rough estimate of the absolute minimum you can survive on. And then, yeah, usually, of course, like the upper bound is not probably what you're interested in, but the lower bound is, yeah, I guess, those numbers that I mentioned.
Entonces, Pablo, el mínimo absoluto, mínimo de los mínimos mínimos, son unos 520 euros al mes, que esto vienen a ser unos 650 dólares americanos. Pero algo más razonable serían unos 750 euros, unos 850 dólares americanos al mes, viviendo frugalmente. Y luego a partir de eso solo sube. Yo personalmente gasto un poquito más, pero bueno. Sí. Entonces, de nada, espero que te haya servido, espero que te haya sido útil. I hope you found this useful.
Thanks, guys. Well, great. I think we're going to wrap up our chat for today. If you are joining us today, or if you're watching this video on YouTube and you have more questions, again, we're super happy to hear from you on Facebook, on the blog. You can also send us an email through the website. And of course, here on Google+, although this account, the Sweden account, is mainly focused on Sweden in general. So for Study in Sweden questions, please reach out to us on Facebook or on one of the other channels we've discussed. Or if we come to your country for an event, we'd love to see you at fairs and other events. So thanks, everyone, and welcome to Sweden. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Ja.